But you did throw a big temptation out there, so I do have to ask. You said you had all sorts of stories about the time that you were doing wholesale type things and so on. Love to hear some stories.
All right, I'll give you one story. And
There you go.
this is like a summary of something that transpired a few years ago. It actually, a version of the story made it into New York Times one week in the business section. So one of the more popular items I used to sell online, I would manufacture it and bring it in, was a mini donut machine. Certain restaurants, entrepreneurs love to make donuts, so it was a good seller. And I would frequently sell this machine on eBay for, depending on the time of year, around like $1,500 or so. And I don't know if you're familiar with how the eBay dispute resolution process works, but they're very buyer slanted in terms of like, I have an idea of why they do it. There's some incentives as to why eBay does it, but they're inclined to listen to buyers when there's a dispute,
Yes.
even in the absence of real evidence the buyers might have. And I've been on both sides. Like I bought from eBay plenty of times and I've sold plenty of times, but I know from being on both sides how biased they can be and how they rule on certain things. Anyhow, so I sold this machine to a particular lady. I tested it. I actually had the assembler's video it's being used before I shipped to her. So I had proof that it actually worked. Mountains of evidence. Buyer gets the item, and I should actually backtrack here. This machine, it's a commercial kitchen equipment. So it's not something that the average person can plug into their home outlet and it'll work. It requires a certain amount of amperes and voltage to work. And because I understand this and I like to make sure people get what they need, I was painstakingly clear in most of my listings about certain things that required a specific environment. And with this machine, it required a certain electrical environment. So I put that in bold, like, do not buy this if you don't have X, Y, Z. But people try to buy it because sometimes they don't understand electricity, et cetera, et cetera. Anyhow, so a lady bought it. You claimed it didn't work. She described the symptoms of what was happening. I knew just by listening to it that said she probably didn't have the right electrical environment for it. Anyhow, I told her, all right, you can return it. You have to abide by the return conditions, which means you have to pay to ship it back because this is like an 80-pound machine, so it costs a lot of money to ship. Anyhow, we had some back and forth. She told eBay that the machine didn't work. And despite mountains of evidence that I sent to eBay showing that the machine worked, they sided with her, and they were going to stick me with the bill of not only paying to have it returned to myself, but to give the lady her money back. But it's like, you've already used it, and et cetera. Anyhow, so rather than just settle with what eBay was telling me, I have to pay X, Y, Z to resolve this problem, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to deal with this. I decided I'm going to write to the New York Times. There was a particular column that used to run called The Haggler. He was like a consumer affairs reporter. Yeah, I used to love reading his stuff. So I'm like, I'm creative. Let me come up with a solution. So I write to the guy, I pitch him the story. I said, listen, this is what happened. I think it'll be a great story. Your readers are going to love reading this. And he went for it. He's like, yeah, this is actually really good. So I told him the story. He ran the story in the New York Times. It was like the front page of Business Times that particular Sunday. That Monday, like 2 or 3 eBay execs called me trying to solve the problem now. All of a sudden, I've got their attention now. And eventually the problem was solved, which was good to my satisfaction. And another coup that I really appreciated the Haggler he actually did some research on me, and he mentioned my book. I didn't even tell him I had this book. He mentioned my book, I guess because the title is particularly controversial and attention grabbing. Title of the book is called No Doesn't Always Mean No. That required a subtitle, Strategies for Influencing Behavior and Winning Cooperation. So it was a nod to one of Dale Carnegie's famous books I was a fan of. And he mentioned the book in the column, which was nice, and I got some attention for that. But that's just one story related to the wholesale business. There's a whole bunch of things. Like I've been in it for years, researching how to find certain sellers, both U.S. and international. I've got a bunch of like research and skills related to that. I've helped other people do it in some aspects. So that's just one story of many I thought would be useful. So.
That's pretty cool. Well, at least it did get resolved, and you found a real creative way to make it get resolved, which was of course a good thing.
That's what I try to do. I never feel like I'm boxed in. Like a lot of people feel like, oh, well, you can't do this. This is how it's always been done. Like, why? Why? Why can't
Yeah.
you do that?
Yeah.
Start asking why, start letting your mind run the gamut of potentials, and you'll come up with all sorts of solutions. That's really what I help a lot of my clients do as well. Is like, people told you this couldn't work. Why? Let's examine that. So